Okay, today's subject is credit cards. You know what a credit card is, right? Maybe you have one already. What we're going to get into in these videos is going to be surprising to a lot of you. You might think credit cards is kind of a simple subject, but it's not. And I think I can take you through 95% of really what you need to know about credit cards in just an hour or so, which is always convenient. We can cover a topic so quickly. So we're going to talk about some stuff that I'm sure you've never heard of before. You're going to be pretty excited, I think, with some of the material that we have today. I think you'll enjoy it. All right, so first of all, let's talk about how they work. How do credit cards work? Well, credit cards essentially provide a form of borrowing. And this is what deviates between the two major payment methods nowadays. In terms of payment methods, there's, I guess we could say, three primary methods of payment. There's credit cards, debit cards, and then there's cash. And of course, there's things like Venmo, but Venmo is essentially operationally very similar to a debit card. So if you're using cash, obviously you're not borrowing any money, you're paying simultaneously. If you're using a debit card, you're not really borrowing either because the money is directly withdrawn from your account. But if you use a credit card, you are indeed borrowing money. So you're borrowing money from some large financial institution. The big boys being companies like Chase and Barclays that offer a lot of different credit cards. So you're the borrower, they're the lender. And how quickly you pay them back is going to decide whether credit cards are useful to you or potentially a complete and utter disaster. All right. In regards to credit cards, there's some terms that you need to know in regards to strategizing for credit cards. If you have a credit card, you log into your account, you'll see a statement balance, which is different from a current balance. I remember the first time I got a credit card, didn't really know what I was doing. I did not understand the difference between these two terms. The current balance is just how much you owe in total. Period. Just how much you owe. But the statement balance is actually going to be more useful to you and more important to you in a lot of cases. Okay? The statement balance is how much you must pay in order to avoid fees and interest. Okay? Generally, credit cards are set up with payments once a month. That pay period of once a month, sometimes you can control it. You could say, I want it to be the first of the month. A lot of times it's just based on 1 month after you initialized your card. So it can be kind of arbitrary when your payment date is. But if you log in and you look at your credit card, you might see that you have a current balance of $1,000 and you have a statement balance of $600. And so what that means is if you make the statement balance payment of $600, you will completely avoid interest and fees. All right? You could also decide, if you wanted to pay off the balance in full, the full $1,000. But in that case, you don't get any real benefit from it. You just maybe feel better because you don't have any debt. What we'll see is, credit cards, what they really do that's advantageous, one major thing they do is they allow you to borrow for free. So if you're the type of person who wants to get wealthier, chances are you would like to invest as much money as possible. So if you think about it in this scenario, you could go ahead and pay out the full $1,000, okay? Or you could just pay $600, leaving $400 of debt. Normally we don't like debt in personal finance, but this is interest-free debt. As long as the next month you make your statement balance payment, you're not going to be charged any debt. So you can think of it this way. If you make $600 payment now, that leaves $400 extra that you can invest. So credit cards give you the ability to invest more money because you get to push back when you actually pay for things. Okay? Another amount that you might see listed on your credit card that you need to know about, you will see a minimum payment. Minimum payment might be something like $40 or so. And that minimum payment, some people get suckered into this thinking, well, oh, it's a minimum. Well, I'll just make the minimum payment, and they don't really understand how that works. The minimum payment is the minimum payment that allows you to avoid fees, but you're still charged interest. So a lot of credit card companies will enforce late fees. So a late fee penalty might be like, $50, $60. So you avoid that $50 or $60 fee, but you still are going to be charged interest. So making the minimum payment is not good. If you're in a situation where you're forced to make the minimum payment, that usually means you're not in good financial standing. Essentially, you have debt that you're not able to currently pay off. It's okay to have debt, right? Debt happens. Student loan debt, mortgage debt, these types of debts are okay. Credit card debt is not good, right? It's the worst form of debt that you can often have in your life. The reason is the interest is usually really high. The rates they charge are much higher than mortgage debt or student loan debt or usually car debt, okay? A typical rate might be something like 20% compounded daily, right? Compounded 365 times a year. And that's terrible, okay? So occasionally I'll talk to people that really don't have any personal finance skills, and their thing is like, I'll ask them, about their personal finance, and they'll be like, well, I have $5,000 in debt. And I'm like, okay, well, that sort of is meaningless. I have over $200,000 in debt if you count my mortgage, right? But mortgage debt is not so painful. The interest rates are low. Housing value tends to go up. With mortgages, you can choose just to walk away if you had to. You'd lose your house, but it's not really debt, right? This is more painful debt because it's going to grow very fast and you can't walk away from it. You can't just be like, I'm not going to pay my credit card, right? You'd have to go into bankruptcy, your credit score would be ruined, all kinds of negative things would happen, okay? So this is the worst form of debt that you're going to commonly come upon, all right? So if somebody tells me they have $5,000 in debt, my immediate next question is, well, what kind of debt are you talking about, right? If it's credit card debt, that can be really bad, but even then it's not always the same. You may have seen that there are some 0% interest credit cards that charge you no interest for a time period of maybe up to 21 months. Well, that debt's not so bad. So we can't compare all debt against each other. We need to think about bad debt and good debt. And most credit card debt is going to be bad debt, all right? For this reason, and I can't stress this enough, do not get a credit card if you don't have the ability to make payments for your card, all right? The interest rates are so high, they're going to eat you alive. And there's no faster way to ruin your finances than borrowing a bunch of money on a credit card and that money you don't have, all right? So if you have poor self-control, just stay away from credit cards. However, if you're personally financially skilled, you're responsible, you do have self-control, what you're going to learn from today's lesson is there's a significant amount of potential benefit from using credit cards responsibly, okay? All right, so let's talk more about the ins and outs of credit cards before we dive into the weeds. What you're going to see is if you use credit cards responsibly, that indeed there's significant savings to be had. Which begs the question, why are credit card companies willing to give you essentially a good deal? Why are they willing to give you 0% interest for 21 months? That seems like a bad deal to give somebody an interest-free loan. So we need to understand how they profit. So how do credit card companies profit? I think this is a useful question. Help you understand what you're getting into when you have a credit card. All right. First thing to note is that credit cards charge fees to merchants. These are called merchant fees. All right. Essentially, every time you make a payment, the person you're paying when you use a credit card is charged a percentage of that amount. Okay, and the typical amount is like 1.5% to 3%, depending on the specific type of card you use, depending on how the payment is processed. You may have seen options before when you use a card. They ask, do you want to swipe it as debit or credit? There's differences there. But the bottom line is, if you go to Blackbird and you buy a $3 coffee and you use a credit card, Blackbird does not get $3. They get $3 minus whatever the credit card company is taking. And it might be a quarter. Okay, small purchases, they usually take a bigger percent. So what that means is, for the person you're paying, credit cards are not a good deal. This is part of the reason why companies often have things like, if you use a credit card, the price will be a little bit lower. You'll see that sometimes with gas stations. Or they'll say things like $10 minimum when you use a credit card. That has to really do with getting people to not use credit cards in situations where it's really bad for the business, okay? That being said, me and you, we're selfish, right? We are consumers. We're looking out for ourselves. We're not necessarily looking out for the merchants. So I still use a credit card because I'm not the one paying the fee. Maybe I'm a jerk, but that's how I feel about it. I'm not the one paying the fee, so I'm going to do what's best for me. And for me, credit cards offer tremendous savings, so I'm going to take advantage of that. All right, so that's one thing they do. Of course, they earn interest off of debt. All right, and when I say debt here, I don't mean, for me, I pay my statement balance every single month. I owe credit card companies right now, but it's not really debt in my eyes. It's just delayed payment. My interest rate that I'm being charged is 0% because I always pay my statement balance in full. But there are a lot of people out there that are very much in debt. If you are $10,000 in debt with a credit card, the consequences are absolutely massive, okay? So let's say we have, for example, 10 years, 10 years of debt on $10,000, and let's stick with that 20% compounding daily. And let's just imagine, it's kind of a silly example, but let's just think about how much debt you would have after this period, okay? So if you could somehow have $10,000 in debt today, like a lot of people do, compounding it daily at a 20% rate, this would be our formula that we would need here. Let's see what this comes out to. Yeah, so you can kind of see here why this is a problem. That's what I get. If you can imagine this scenario, you're $10,000 in credit card debt, you don't make any payments for 10 years, you would end up with about $74,000 in debt. In reality, it's worse than that because you'd also be charged late fees during this entire period, and probably they wouldn't let you get away with running up debt this long without making any payments. But as an exercise, this is the logic of why credit card companies make profit off of debt. People in debt this amount will often go bankrupt. Sometimes they will never make any payments, okay? Maybe a third of the time they don't make any payments on this debt. But if 2/3 of the time they do, credit card companies are going to make a huge amount of profit off these people. This is a bit of an issue because you should understand that credit card companies make more profit off of you on average when you don't make payments. So they're in a situation where they may be incentivized to put you in a situation where you're forgetting to make your payments. And there are rules, there are laws about what they can get away with, but you should recognize that the credit card company really isn't on your side because they profit off of you when you screw yourself over, okay? So debt, a big part of how credit card companies make their money. We've got debt, we've got fees. Another thing they do is they sell your information to third parties. A lot of people are doing this these days, right? You get on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, people are collecting data from that and they're using that to market to you. Credit card companies do the same thing. A lot of times you get a credit card, there's lots of things you're agreeing to. You might start getting stuff in the mail, advertisements sent to you in the mail. Depending on your views, that could be a big problem or a small problem, okay? And then the last one I'm just going to mention here is they also have partnerships with other firms. Sometimes companies will do things like, I saw this actually just today. If you purchase something on Amazon with a American Express card today, you get $20 off a $50 purchase. And it's available on specific items that are available on Amazon. So essentially, they're packaging the credit card system into advertisements on Amazon. And what Amazon gets out of that, see, is they get to segment the population. They've decided that for whatever reason, they need purchases from people using American Express cards. That's like a target audience for them. So they can use the credit card as a way to target a specific audience. There wouldn't be any other way for them to do that, right? But they specifically can target one group because they know that a certain group of people have the American Express cards, okay? So that's some of the benefits to credit card companies. And if you don't know it, these companies we're talking about make huge, huge profits, okay? They're taking on risks, they're lending money to people, right? It's a risky thing, but there are companies making, billions of dollars in profits every single year off of credit cards. So obviously, they make a lot of money off of this. That being said, you got to recognize that even though they're profitable, that doesn't mean you can't be profitable off of credit cards too. The first one, as a consumer, you don't care about because you're not the one paying the fee. The second one, don't go into debt, and you don't have to worry about that. The third and the fourth, maybe that's problematic, maybe that's a cost in your eyes, but for me, I'm willing to give up some of my information. I'm willing to be marketed to based on how big the credit card benefits are that I get. All right? So let's talk about the two schools of thought in regards to credit cards. Two schools of thought. All right, there are basically two ways to think about credit cards. There's the camp that believes you shouldn't use a credit card, and then there's the camp that believes credit cards are an amazing proposition for responsible people. So one of those schools of thought is Dave Ramsey and others. I'm sure you guys have heard about Dave Ramsey. He's somebody who is like a personal finance guru. One of his main ideals is that people should avoid debt. He says that if you're in debt, you should view it like a hair on fire situation, and basically cut all spending that you can in order to pay that debt off as fast as possible. Totally on board with that. All right, I'm with you on that one, Dave Ramsey. However, what I would say to you guys, maybe this is a little bit controversial, maybe it's a mean thing to say, but Dave Ramsey's target audience is people who are not very smart. Dave Ramsey's target audience is people that are bad at personal finance, okay? That's probably not you, okay? It's probably not you that's his target audience. So don't get a credit card, Dave Ramsey says. Avoid it entirely. He said before, no one's ever gotten rich off of credit cards, which I think is kind of a dumb thing to say because lots of things we don't get rich off of, but they're still worth it, right? So credit cards aren't about getting rich, right, as a customer, but there are amazing perks that are available. So Dave Ramsey has basically decided that his life mission is going to be to avoid debt. People shouldn't get credit card. That's based on who he's dealing with, right? He's dealing with people who ruin themselves, completely financially ruin themselves by credit card spending, right? They get a credit card with a $10,000 spending limit, they run up the maximum balance, and now they're in debt, and their entire lives are in jeopardy just because of this one debt situation they took on, all right? As long as you're not that person, as long as you have self-control, I would say you probably won't agree with camp number one here with Dave Ramsey. That being said, there are some reasons that Dave Ramsey does have a point. As we said before, most importantly, interest rates are very high. Credit cards, it's a bad form of debt. If you want to take on debt, don't take on credit card debt. Credit card debt can't be deducted, right? It doesn't fit in as an above-the-line deduction or as a potential itemization. It's bad debt, okay? But beyond that, getting into more nuanced ideas here, research shows that people spend more when they use a card. And this isn't kind of like just a one-off finding that one researcher found. No, it's been found pretty consistently that when people use credit cards, they usually spend more money than they do with cash. People who use credit cards often don't remember their purchases as well as people who use cash, and their willingness to pay goes up. And a lot of studies have shown this. So you can imagine why this is potentially a disaster for debt. People get a credit card and then they spend more than they anticipated, unexpectedly going into debt, and now they have to face those really high interest rates. So again, there are consequences potentially of using a credit card if you're not using it correctly. All right, so that being said, the other school of thought is the one that I generally recommend to people that are good at personal finance, me and you, hopefully, right? And that is that credit cards have a lot of value. They can absolutely ruin you if you use them incorrectly. But for somebody who's good at their personal finances and responsible, they are absolutely something that can save you, believe it or not, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the long run. I will prove that to you, okay? The reasons why credit cards give significant potential benefits, we're going to talk about today. They give cash back rewards. We will talk about this. Maybe something you have heard about credit cards is they offer rewards. You might not understand how lucrative those are. For me, I did the math. On average, I generate about $3,500 in extra savings because I use a credit card just because of these rewards. I'm kind of an insane person about credit cards. I go really hardcore with it, but I get significant savings from them just because of these rewards. We're going to talk about something called a payment float, which is something I doubt you've really thought about before. Use as an emergency tool for borrowing. Normally when I think about credit card purchases, I don't think of it as borrowing, but in some cases, you know, your car breaks down, you need to make a payment, you might use a credit card. A lot of them offer 0% interest. That sounds like an irresponsible thing to do, right? To take on credit card debt? Well, what if you got 80 grand in a Roth IRA, right? You got 80 grand in a Roth IRA, you could always withdraw some of that money if you needed to, but you're going to let the credit card work for you. You're going to get a 0% interest credit card, so you don't have to withdraw money from your Roth IRA. It's not being irresponsible, it's being smart, okay? So again, if you use it correctly as a borrowing tool, credit cards can be useful. And as a fourth and final and probably least important potential benefit, you can use credit cards to increase your credit score. You can use credit cards to decrease your credit score too, right? If you go into debt and don't make payments, but you know, this is thinking about the things you could do if you're very responsible. So we're going to go through each of these. One, it's going to take a little while to go through this, but it's easy stuff. 2, payment float. That's the hardest part of the material for today. And then 3 and 4, be quick. Okay, so now we can talk about the benefits here. We'll start with the first one, cash back and travel rewards. At its core, very simple idea, but it can be complex. I'll go ahead and tell you now, the complex stuff I'm going to teach you in this video, but I'm not going to ask you to solve mathematically on the quizzes or exams, okay? It would kind of be unnecessary math to learn. But I want to prove to you that there are significant potential benefits here, okay? So let me go ahead and give you an example of a credit card. Citi Double Cash Credit Card. Nothing particularly special about this card, but I like to discuss it because it is simple, all right? It's simple, so we don't have to go into like the extreme details. The credit card world can get really confusing. So we're gonna start with a nice simple one to discuss, all right? This card has no annual fee. A lot of cards have annual fees, which you wanna be very careful with. Some are $500, $750 a year. They offer potential massive benefits, but you might not wanna mess around with those high annual fee cards. So this one has no annual fee, so pretty good card to have, and it offers 2% cash back on all purchases. How this specific card works is when you are charged, they knock 1% off, and when you pay the card back, they knock another 1% off. So effectively, everything becomes 2% cheaper, all right? So you can imagine 2 people here, one spending money in cash, might spend $40,000 a year. So compare that to another person who doesn't use cash, all right? Let's imagine that the second person uses a card, specifically the Citi Double Cash Card. And effectively what that is going to do is it's going to reduce their spending by 2%, right? If their amount drops by 2%, that means 98% of expenses remain. That's where that math comes from. And so effectively, this person's going to spend $39,200 a year for an $800 saving. Nice, right? $800 saved a year, not bad. Now what Dave Ramsey would say is, no one's going to get rich on credit cards, right? Why take on the risk of a credit card, which could put you tremendously in debt for, what seems like pretty meager savings of $800 a year? Well, Dave Ramsey, you're not speaking to me, you're not speaking to people in this class. We are more sophisticated when it comes to our decision-making processes, and we're going to be responsible, okay? We need to think about what this enables us to do, okay? Think about it this way. Since person 2 spends $800 less, they can realize $800 less in taxable income. This is where we move from the simple idea to the more complex, okay? Think about if the second person here took the savings that they generated and invested it into a 401k. Now, it takes a little bit of interesting math here, okay? You might be tempted to think, well, person 2 can put $800 into a 401k, but it's actually going to be more than that, all right? Because the $800 that they're saving never has to be realized as income. Since they're never realizing it as income, it's never going to be taxed as income, right? The extra $800 that's being spent here must have already been taxed, okay? So I did the math, and this is not what you're going to be responsible to solve for, but I did the math. And so for an average person faces a 22% U.S. tax rate, okay? An average person faces a 5.75% Georgia tax rate. You can imagine that you could avoid those two taxes. And so what that means is it takes $1,107.27 to spend $800. Now, where's that math coming from? Okay, keep in mind, if you're going to spend $800, it must have already been taxed. So this is the pre-tax income that it takes in order to generate $800 in post-tax income for a typical person who's at the 22% tax rate. Okay, so the second person here could buy exactly the same products and spend $40,000. But that would enable them to save over $1,100 into a traditional 401k. You can see why Dave Ramsey's not talking about this on the radio, right? It's too complex. Most people can't understand it. That's fine. There's things I can't understand. Personal finance is something I'm good at. There's other stuff I'm terrible at, okay? But personal finance here, if you're thinking about it correctly, you recognize that $800 that you save has a big opportunity cost. And that opportunity cost is high to me and you because we know what to do with the dollar, okay? So that $800 in savings becomes $1,100. So extrapolating this out, if you could continue this for 35 years, if every year for 35 years you saved an extra $800 in spending, right? And you used it to contribute to a 401k instead. I did the math. 35 years, 7% interest, which is like a real interest rate, right? Put it in stocks on average, you get a 7% real return. This comes out to $163,780.10 in extra 401k value. Do I have your attention now, right? That's significant. That's like 2 or 3 years of early retirement if you want it. That's buying 4 or 5 nice vehicles. That's buying a house in Milledgeville, right? That's a tremendous amount of value. And I'm just using a 7% return. Okay, by the way, if you want to see the math, I can make another video if you want and show you how I got to that number. I'm just not going to test you on it, so I'm not going to bother with it. But if you want to see it, I can provide it to you. Okay? This is just imagining for every year, for 35 years, you had that much extra. Okay? Now imagine your spending levels are even higher. Compare yourself to somebody who's making 80 grand to you who's making 80 grand, but you're using a card and they're not. Double this amount. Now it's 320 some thousand. right? Significant savings if you're doing things perfectly. Most people won't generate that much in gains because they won't do it perfectly. They won't contribute it to a 401k necessarily. Or maybe they end up spending the extra, okay? Maybe they even end up spending more, Dave Ramsey would say. But we got to be smart, right? We got to make sure that we're taking the emotion out of our decisions. We're trying to save as much as we possibly can. So how could it possibly not be the case that 2% savings is not worth it to us, right? 2% savings has always got to be a good thing. If cashback alone is not interesting enough to you, there's also cards that offer something called a minimum spend bonus. I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out how to maximize my minimum spend bonuses. Like I said, I'm kind of extreme when it comes to credit cards, but you don't have to. You can get value out of it without being super extreme, okay? You can get just a city cash card we just talked about and save a lot of money, right? A minimum spend bonus is something that a lot of credit cards offer. And essentially what happens is you receive a reward for spending some amount of money over a certain amount of time. Okay, this is not a complex idea at all. So that X could be any amount of money, but let me just give you an example. The Chase Sapphire Preferred card. Really nice card. It's one that I use. I have several cards, but this is one that I use. The Chase Sapphire Preferred provides a $600 cashback reward for $4,000 in spending in the first 3 months. Okay? So you can imagine that, getting an extra $600 in any given year is very valuable. You could apply the same logic that we just showed in the last example. If you save $600, you could have instead take the money that you're saving, put it into a 401k, yada, 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 right? What makes this potentially very valuable is you might decide to go through several cards in a given year, okay? This is referred to as churning. Search churning on the web, you're going to find all kinds of details. A lot of y'all, I suspect, are going to be pretty interested in what we're talking about today. Reddit has a really good churning. It's just reddit.com/r/churning. They have a really good page dedicated to this process, okay? There's another website called The Points Guy. I'll mention that in the email that I send you guys, but my college roommate at Georgia College, his name is Richard Kerr, is very high up with The Points Guy, and so we actually have like a direct contact on these credit card issues. He actually usually comes and speaks to this class when I do it in person. Anyway, if you're interested, look up churning. This is the process of applying for many cards over time to receive lots of these bonuses. Receive lots of minimum spend bonuses. That's the act of churning. There are rules, there are complexities I'm not going to get into in this video. It gets complicated when you want to do this a lot, and there is some limits. At some point, you're not going to be able to get more cards. I'm kind of at that limit. It's hard for me to get more credit cards right now. But I extracted a tremendous amount of value over time. So I did this. I got the $600 cash benefit, and on top of that, this card also offers 2% cash back on spending. So when I spent $4,000, not only did I get $600, but I also got 2% on that $4,000. So I'm going to save a bunch of money in the long run. I did the math at one point and tried to figure out how much this was saving me every year. I averaged it over a 5-year period, really just to teach to you guys. And what I found is I save about $3,500 a year in spending. Okay? Now, it's hard to say what I do with that money, that saving, right? This money that I have extra, maybe I end up spending some of it. Maybe it all goes into my 457. I don't know, because it's kind of hard to compartmentalize your spending, right? The bottom line is, though, I will apply for 3 or 4 cards in a year if it means I'm going to save $3,500. To me, that is worth fighting and clawing for, that extra $3,500. And if you take this and you extrapolate it over a long period, if you take this for 35 years, doing kind of a very similar math that we just did, this comes out to about $518,000 in savings over my lifetime. Really just over a 35-year period, I should say. And that's not even considering the fact that if I put this in a 401k, it doesn't even get taxed yet. So I don't so much care that you can solve for that. I just want you to understand the magnitude of what we're talking about here. This is not trivial, okay? Saving $800 in credit card may not seem like a big deal, but it is when you start thinking about it all in your personal finance scope. $518,000 saved for me. That's like a third or half of the way to what I need for retirement just from using credit cards. Dave Ramsey would say I spend extra money. I don't know. He could be right. But what I know is if credit card companies are going to give me $600 and I'm responsible, I always pay my statement balance off in full. If credit card companies are going to give me a 2% break on all my purchases, I'm going to take advantage of it, right? It's too valuable not to. So if you can use them responsibly, you can get a tremendous amount of value out of it. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention travel rewards too. There's basically two ways that rewards are often provided. One is in cashback, one is in travel. So cashback, we know what that is. Not really anything more to talk about, right? So what we've been discussing so far has all been cashback. But a lot of other cards offer travel rewards. These benefits can be small, they can be large, but basically for me, because of all the credit cards I use, I never pay for flights anymore. I never pay for hotel stays anymore. I've built up so many points for my credit cards that essentially I have just reservoir of resources to pay for any of my travel expenses that I have. Credit card companies will often give you an incentive to use your points for travel instead of cash back. Chase Sapphire Preferred card I mentioned, they give you 60,000 points. You can redeem those for $600 for your minimum spend bonus, or you can use them for travel. And if you use them for travel, it's kind of like you get $1.50 to the dollar you get with cash back. Again, I'm not really going to test you on this, but I just want you to note, if you are going to travel, credit cards become even more valuable, okay? So this is part of the reason why I'm able to generate $3,500 in savings. Just give you a little tip right now. When I go to conferences, Georgia College pays for them, but we use our credit cards to purchase them up front. I use my credit card to purchase my flight. Georgia College redeems it back to me, and then I get a statement credit on my credit card paying me back for that flight. So essentially, I get paid to fly. It's a really good deal, all right? And I'm not hurting anybody when I do it because everyone's agreeing to these terms. It doesn't hurt Georgia College. I'm going to the conference I would have anyway, but it just saves me money, okay? All right, so cashback and travel credit cards, a big deal. Now that's going to take us to the second big deal, the payment float.